One of the most popular television programs in history was created by Carol Burnett. Every week she made millions of people laugh and took home 25 Emmys. However, something unexpected occurred backstage on October 27, 1973. The props reverberated down the corridor as her 7 seasons partner slammed a door with such force. She immediately fired him a few minutes later. The team has been speculating about when it will occur. The most outrageous aspect is that this was not even the worst Hollywood betrayal she has experienced. The individuals Carol Burnett vowed never to collaborate with again are being exposed today. On April 26, 1933, Carol Burnett was born in San Antonio, Texas. The Great Depression was engulfing families at a time when nearly everyone was having difficulties, and hers was no exception. Joseph and Ina Louise, her parents, made an effort to maintain harmony. He was employed at a petrol station. She penned advertisements for film studios. Nevertheless, money disappeared more quickly than they could make it. They were forced to live on welfare and whatever assistance their neighbors or the government might provide, in a single room without indoor plumbing. Even a single chicken or some used clothes felt like a blessing. Carol also observed the poverty in her surroundings. However, because every home on the street had the same appearance, she never felt alone. She was then gently taught how to withstand circumstances that were too heavy for a child during those early years by her grandmother, Mabel, who stepped in to help. When Carol turned 7, everything changed once more. Her dad started drinking more. In order to live with a babysitter whom Carol referred to as her grandma, after her parents divorced, her mother boarded a train to Hollywood. For a growing girl and her cousin who slept on a pull-out couch, the new apartment was minuscule. From the outside, Hollywood appeared glamorous, but things were stressful inside their house. Her father was constantly being pulled down by his drunkenness. Her mother's hardships trailed closely behind. Carol witnessed adults crumble under duress. She's seen addiction firsthand. She discovered early on that laughter could occasionally come from the darkest places, and that comedy could calm terror. One of the most severe blows followed. Her father passed away on October 29, 1943, from heart failure brought on by drinking. When the news arrived at school in a chilly telegram, she was only 10 years old. She was too young to handle the shock which came upon her like a wave. Nobody truly understood how to discuss loss with a youngster. She had to put that sorrow in the back of her mind and go on. She discovered that even extreme suffering could be transformed into tales that made others feel less isolated. She would share that gift with millions of people one day. School turned become a gateway to a more promising future. She learned at Hollywood High that she could make people laugh with a single glance or a flawless mimicry. Her perception of Ingrid Bergman elicited strong reactions, and every chuckle drew her nearer to the stage. She received a journalism scholarship from UCLA, but the theater's lure was stronger. She didn't have the money to perform. She nevertheless took on odd jobs and continued to pursue ambitions that would not go away. She was only starting to realize that her classmates recognized something in her. She was drawn in a different direction by love. She left UCLA in her junior year in 1954 and traveled across the nation in a 1949 Ford that was more full of hope than money with her boyfriend Don Soyan. With just $100, they arrived in New York City. They slept outdoors in the car, looking up at a city that seemed to be testing them before providing them with anything, because they couldn't afford a place at the rehearsal club. Carol, however, was unyielding. She would have to wait for the city to relocate. She quickly secured a position inside the rehearsal club and worked as a hatch check girl, hoping each night that someone in the audience would notice her skill and look past the hat rack. She was tipped $1.50. However, everything changed in March 1955. The club's girls asked agencies and celebrities to participate in a revue. When Carol took the stage, the right individuals were captivated by her comedy and voice. Doors split open as agents noticed. Her name appeared on call sheets for variety shows shortly after. The timid San Antonio girl was on her way in an instant. The ascent went on. Her roommate informed her about tryouts for the musical Once Upon a Mattress in 1956. She went, sang, and made them laugh before revealing herself as Princess Winifred. When the musical debuted on Broadway on November 25, 1959, viewers fell in love with the courageous girl who would splash across a water-filled moat while wearing bloomers. In order to avoid being stuck in one role forever, she declined a movie adaptation despite receiving a Tony nomination. She preferred a broad perspective over a constrained one. In 1960, Gary Moore saw her perform in a nightclub, an opportunity called once more. She appeared on his show. Every week, the nation witnessed her foolishness. She also received her first Oscar in 1962 for her exceptional performance in a variety show. There was more to that victory than just a trophy. It made it clear to everyone that she should be in the spotlight. Then came the moment that would never be forgotten. She sang the song "I Made a Fool of Myself" in February 1962 over national television's John Foster Dulles. It was absurd. It was shrewd. It was just her. The crowd erupted. CBS paid attention. She soon negotiated a bold 10-year contract that opened the door for her own program when they signed and protected her. She attained a degree of artistic ability that very few Hollywood ladies had ever attained. Despite all of her achievements, she continued to prioritize her family. On May 6, 1963, she wed producer Joe Hamilton, who had assisted her in growing her nightclub act. 3 girls were born to them. In December 1963, Carrie arrived first, followed by Jody in January 1967. August 1968 saw the arrival of Aaron. Together they chuckled. Together they battled. Together they grieved. They were not shielded from genuine suffering by fame. At the age of 38, Carrie, who was intelligent and courageous, would pass away from cancer. Aaron would struggle with addiction. However, Carol's love for her kids was unwavering despite her celebrity. She was creating one of the most adored television programs, while the entire globe watched her smile. She insisted on doing it her way when she submitted a weekly variety program pitched to CBS in 1967. Harvey Korman was brought in by her after 12 auditions. Lyle Wagner was introduced by her. After witnessing Vicki Lawrence participating in a local competition, she recognized her. The cast clicked. On September 11, 1967, The Carol Burnett Show made its debut. It outperformed Westerns. Every week 30 million people watched it. It presented her well-known ear tug, a small token of affection for her grandmother who was watching at home. The audience was like family. The laughter continued. She stunned everyone in October 1967 when she descended a staircase wearing a garment made of actual curtains. Rod is still in place. The parody of Went with the Wind gained notoriety. Now displayed in the Smithsonian, the curtain garment serves as a reminder that the best jokes can endure longer than the majority of somber works of art. When Tim Conway started writing in 1972, he made a hilarious dentist sketch that made Harvey Korman laugh so hard on live TV that he lost control. Over the years, the program received 25 Emmys. She was respected in Hollywood. Her admirers loved her. When sponsors threatened to remove $5 million in advertisements because they believed a curtain rod joke went too far, she even resisted pressure from the network. In times of conflict, she paid salaries out of her own pocket to safeguard her cast as well. Every choice she made was infused with loyalty. Even the initially diminutive characters developed into enormous beings. After becoming popular, Vicki Lawrence's mama went on to star in her own comedy. The performance was more than just amusement, it was a fabled factory. However, Carol was never protected from heartache by her stardom. Her marriage was plagued by rumors. Joe admitted to having an affair with the show's set designer in 1974. They had a broken relationship. Her daughter Carrie received a leukemia diagnosis a year later. Carol put everything on hold for her. The anguish was intense, but love kept her steadfast. Another shock followed. Without informing her, Joe had given up control of the program. In 1976, she filed for divorce. The emotional toll was considerably greater than the cash loss. Nevertheless, she remained steadfast, defended her daughters, and continued to run the program that bore her name. She proceeded with dignity and the same quiet grit she had developed as a child when the divorce was formalized in 1984. Together with percussionist Brian Miller, she created a new existence. He assisted in bringing order to the turmoil after being married on March 3, 1977. In order to get away from photographers who would not leave her family alone while they battled with Carrie's health problems, she sold her La Jolla property for $2.8 million in 1980. She discovered once more how important safety was over luxury. She also displayed her bravery in other ways. She featured in Friendly Fire in 1979, and when the Pentagon attempted to stop the movie from being released, the emotional truth of that tale forced her to speak before Congress. She battled to make it visible. She prevailed. 64 million people watched the telecast. She demonstrated that she could break hearts just as readily as she could make them heal through laughing, as seen by the numerous prizes she received. Carol Burnett was at the center of a show that subtly became a machine toward the end of the 1960s. From 1967 to the show's last episode on March 29, 1978, The Carol Burnett Show ran for 11 seasons. She created a world in which pause, music, and sketch humor coexisted in those 279 episodes. And long after the cameras stopped rolling, that universe continued to make money. The show's syndication rights have brought in well over $100 million in lifetime revenue, and repeats and edited collections are still sold, downloaded, and televised globally. Decades later, in 2018, CBS acquired the digital multicast rights for all 11 seasons, ensuring that her variety show continued to reach viewers who weren't even alive when it first. For the series, the industry counted 25 Emmys, but its influence carried the actual weight. Later sketch show creators and actors grew up seeing Carol hold a room, crack herself up, and then transition into a serious song without losing anyone. There were decisions within that success that demonstrated her perspective on humanity. Among them was Jim Nabors. She made him the first visitor of each season since she cherished his presence so much. He made over 50 appearances, making him close to the top of any guest list in television history. She demanded that he receive $5,000 for each appearance. Additionally, she occasionally paid for him out of her own pocket when the show's budget was tight. She took that action because she thought devotion was more important than a line on a spreadsheet, and because she trusted their chemistry. However, she did not always receive that loyalty in return from other people. The older guard in Hollywood watched as Carol's star climbed. She was adored by some. Some people just put up with her. Cary Grant stood amid studio executives and other industry elites at a high-profile gathering at the Beverly Hilton in the late 1960s and gave her a speech she would never forget. He informed her in public that punchlines weren't art and regarded variety programming as lowbrow. The comments struck a profound chord with a lady who had just revolutionized the concept of TV comedy. She continued to be courteous, but a wall rose. She declined to collaborate with him on any upcoming projects. They were chilly and detached until 1986, when he passed away. That incident turned into a silent illustration of a long-standing division within the company. TV comics on one side and movie stars on the other. At award events, they all act like they're applauding each other while secretly arguing. Marlon Brando displayed a distinct form of harm if Cary Grant was a public affront. Annie Brando contacted her at 3 in the morning as she was working on the 1976 television production. He began by complimenting her on her talent. The tone then changed. The call became explicit and graphic throughout the next 30 minutes. She realized she had to turn it off after attempting to keep it light. She was unhappy and ashamed when she eventually hung up the phone, only to wake up the next day to engage in gossip. Details were twisted for sport, and many muttered that the call had gone on for over an hour. From then on, she cut him out of her life. Her staff kept them apart when he showed up at the 1974 AFI ceremony and other events. In a 2025 interview decades later, she listed him as one of 5 Hollywood figures who had harmed her the most, along with an unidentified CBS executive who supposedly blackballed her following her divorce and cost her 2 movie jobs. Power might easily breach limits in private and then act as if nothing had happened in public, as evidenced by the memory of that early morning phone conversation. The show looked gorgeous on camera. The folks who kept it running had their own storms behind the scenes. The greatest example was Harvey Korman. He and Carol worked together to produce magic for years. He laughed till he shuddered, broke in the middle of sketching, and contributed to giving even the most basic elements life. Then, something changed in the early 1970s. He became erratic in his mood. During an October 1973 practice, Petula Clark, a guest star, made a brief sketch suggestion. Korman yelled at her to stay in her lane. There was silence in the room. Clark nearly left the set. There wasn't a single negative day. Crew members had previously seen that he was becoming less amicable with Tim Conway, refusing to participate in ad-libs that often made everyone laugh uncontrollably. In an attempt to control his emotions as much as the content in front of her, Carol began flubbing her own lines. His life was in freefall off stage as well. After 17 years and 4 children, Harvey and Donna Earhart's marriage terminated in 1977. His volatility was fueled by the divorce. More than any other cast member, he stormed into negotiations during the middle of season 7, seeking a raise of $15,000 per episode. He won a salary comparable to that of Tim Conway's, one of the most paid comedians on television at the time. The demand fell on a program that was already operating on a limited budget. Carol and the producers were more concerned with the atmosphere on stage than they were with the money. Harvey became more vocal in his tantrums. While they waited for the next outburst, crew members discussed his erratic behavior in whispers. The appearance of the eruptions was swift. He made fun of Lyle Wagner's bodybuilding positions in front of the crew during one practice, until Wagner became visibly agitated. Vicki Lawrence recalled him blowing out at the wardrobe department in November 1972 because his pants were too tight. What should have been a regular fitting became a commotion when he yelled, "People froze." When discussing him, crew members began to use terms like impossible. The mood became gloomy. Carol, who enjoyed warmth and playfulness, ended up into a workplace that felt like a minefield. She attempted to issue subdued warnings. She drew him aside and reminded him that this was her name on the title card and that she would be held accountable if things didn't work out. She also asked him to give it his all. He paid no attention. He arrived at rehearsal on October 20th, 1973, obviously hungover after missing 2 script revisions. Logs, the stage manager, even noticed that he smelled like alcohol. His intensity wavered and his timing faltered. The crew looked on in shock. Some of them then began wagering $50 on how long it would take for him to permanently leave. After returning home, Carol vented her frustrations in her journal. She expressed in her writing that she thought she was losing command of her own program. A week later, things reached a breaking point. She went down the hall to Harvey's dressing room on October 27, 1973, following yet another stressful practice. She wanted to see how he was feeling and perhaps defuse the situation. He yelled at her when she intervened, telling her it was none of her business, and then slammed the door so forcefully that props rattled down the hallway and others from multiple rooms could hear. It was public in addition to being disrespectful. Everyone could see how little regard he still had for her authority. After that night's taping, Carol informed his agency at William Morris that Harvey was no longer on the show in a matter of minutes. She told him bluntly when she got back to his dressing room that his actions were ruining her performance and tainting the show. Her partner ended their relationship after 7 seasons. Although several of the crew acknowledged they were relieved, they still felt the shock. They had anticipated this. However, Carol wanted to avoid a sour ending to the story if at all possible. She considered her options during the weekend. She determined that Harvey would have to demonstrate that he understood the issue and was able to alter the energy he brought if he returned. He was free to leave, she said, but if he returned he had to be happy or he would be gone forever. She had a plaque put in the corridor that said "Skip Whistle down the hall Monday" to emphasize the point. It was a straightforward request with an obvious meaning. Harvey did just that when he arrived on Monday, October 29th. As the team looked on, he literally skipped down the corridor while whistling Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky. They started giggling. The stress subsided. The show continued when Carol welcomed him back. Later, while he was standing atop the counter at the CBS bar, he said, "She fired me." He revealed that he respected her backbone while narrating the tale with an odd blend of pride and humility. He received an Emmy for Best Supporting Actor in 1974. A moment that demonstrated how their professional chemistry had withstood the crisis and in some respects strengthened it. When they reunited for specials years later, many at his memorial would note that being fired had really improved their relationship and given them newfound respect for one another. When Corman was not with Carol, his career seldom peaked at the same level. He attempted to construct his own car after quitting the show in 1977. In the same year that the Harvey Korman Show debuted, its ratings nearly instantly plummeted. It was canceled by CBS after just 5 episodes. Later on, Harvey referred to it as his greatest career error. He blamed poor casting, claiming that viewers could not see him as a standalone star and only accepted him with Carol. Carol was never a gloat. She remained his companion until his death at the age of 81 on May 29, 2008. She spoke at his memorial when people noted his lengthy career and 15 Emmy Awards. However, the narrative that persisted was the one that presented his dismissal from her program as a watershed moment that strengthened rather than weakened their relationship. Conflict's effects extended beyond co-stars. Carol's private life was shocking in and of itself. She learned in 1982 that Joe Hamilton, her husband and show producer, had secretly established Hamilton Productions. Without informing her, he had registered spin-offs and related properties like Mama's Family under his own name through that business. Subsequent court filings revealed that he had established multiple businesses to assert ownership of content that sprang directly from her labor, including lucrative syndication rights. More information came to light during their 1984 divorce, and any depiction of a single united partnership was replaced by cold calculations, unfaithfulness, and concealed riches. He allegedly assured her that business decisions had nothing to do with emotion when she confronted him at their CBS offices. As a wife and the creative mind behind the brand he was packaging, it seemed like a double betrayal to her. For almost a year, the legal battle over that treachery continued. Every judicial action was reported by publications like People and Variety. The judge ultimately gave her 60% of the syndication earnings in addition to the show's name. It appeared to be a win on paper. In private, it caused wounds. She had created a spectacle that brought wealth to others. She now knew that someone she trusted the most had secretly diverted some of those riches. Carol utilized her influence to advocate for justice where she could, even in the midst of these storms. Vicki Lawrence noticed a discrepancy in the paychecks in 1974 that she could no longer ignore. She made much less than Lyle Wagner, who was earning $8,000 every episode. She sought Carol's assistance. Carol supported her in the conflict rather than retreating from it. Collectively, they persuaded CBS to increase Vicki's pay to $6,500 per show. It closed the gap and set a silent example, but it was still less than Lyle. Carol assisted a younger female co-star in requesting more during a period when women in television were frequently thankful just to be present. Carol's name kept showing up in unexpected places while the outer world also changed. Because of its message of taking care of the weakest and most vulnerable, many viewers adored the 1970 animated show Horton Hears a Who, in which she voiced Horton. 6 Dr. Seuss books were withdrawn from distribution in 2021 due to racist content, including wartime caricatures that horrified readers when they resurfaced. It was difficult to ignore the contrast. Carol had given voice to a narrative that seemed gentle and inclusive. Her earlier work was suddenly given a new context as the argument over how to divorce art from its maker swept across society as the creator was being re-examined for potentially dangerous images. Her own legacy continued to evolve. The White House recognized her exceptional contributions to American entertainment in 2005 by putting the Presidential Medal of Freedom around her neck. She was awarded the 2013 Mark Twain Prize for American Humor, joining a group that also includes Bill Cosby and Richard Pryor, demonstrating how complex and dynamic the concept of a comic legend can be. Through reruns and excerpts, her show, which had ceased in 1978, continued to receive millions of views every month. Her official YouTube channel started releasing episodes non-stop in early 2025, and in just 3 months it had amassed 700 million views. Instead of Saturday night television, younger audiences found her via laptops and phones. Nevertheless, they chuckled at the same drawings. For her performance in Palm Royale, she received a 2024 Primetime Emmy nomination at the age of 92, becoming the oldest female nominee in the comedy acting category. That statistic shocked even seasoned business professionals. It indicated that she was more than simply a sentimental illusion and that she was still involved in the current discussion. Her personal narrative was just as significant as the accolades and statistics. She was infertile due to an MS instance in the 1950s, which she seldom ever discussed in public. She dedicated herself fully to her work and family, adopting 3 children. Her estate was estimated to be worth $75 million by 1991. Due to continued syndication, book sales, license agreements, and residuals from her series, that amount had increased to over $500 million by 2025. One More Time, her autobiography, and other memoirs continued to be published and sold consistently, supporting her influence and money accounts. Old chunks of physical humor continued to generate new cash when classic skits were licensed for use in ads, new series, and streaming packages. As she grew older, the business and the suffering continued. She declined a cameo in a projected Blazing Saddles sequel in 2025, which many fans had thought she would appear in due to her connections to Harvey Korman, who had a significant part in the first movie, and Mel Brooks. She rejected, citing the conflict with Korman in the last years of her show and stating that she was afraid old tensions might resurface. His name was still displayed as a memorial and memory on the door of his former dressing room at CBS. It represented their multi-layered collaboration, which had been filled with creativity, rage, dismissal, forgiveness, and ultimately love. Carol continued to narrate her own story in fragments during this entire ordeal. She recounted a crazy incident during a 1982 photo shoot with President Ronald Reagan in a 2016 memoir. She chose to play a practical joke on the magazine crew by mooning them in a packed room. The shot was not published by the publication, concerned about criticism from conservative readers and Reagan's crew. She later acknowledged that she could have overreacted to the joke. As evidence that she could still misinterpret a line in the same manner that she pushed limits on stage, the unpublished photo became part of her legend. She listed 5 individuals who had harmed her in that 2025 chat, keeping count of those who had done so. She brought up Cary Grant's disparaging comment about her art, Marlon Brando's late-night call, and an unidentified executive who barred her from working on movies following her divorce. Additionally, she alluded to years of covert sabotage and public humiliation that the majority of viewers were unaware of. In 2008, however, the same woman who carried those memories also took the podium to offer Harvey Korman's eulogy. She informed the audience that even their separation had influenced their subsequent work in some way and that his timing was invaluable. She admitted that although his dismissal from her concert had initially seemed like a catastrophe, it had ultimately deepened their respect for one another when they took the stage again.